The word virgin is not in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah used the Hebrew word Almah, which means simply young woman. He did not use the word Betula, which means virgin. Isaiah's text announces that the woman is with child, which hardly qualifies her to be a virgin. Of course, the presuppositions there are very transparent. The king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. Esther is now no longer a virgin. She is a...
When the Old Testament was translated into Greek, did they mistranslate the word virgin? Did it really mean young lady? And when I react to a lot of Cliff Connectley videos, that accusation constantly gets brought up all the time.
The whole concept of the Immaculate Conception goes completely out of the window. Jesus was not born of a virgin. And I think it's particularly interesting that only two of the Gospels knew this. Paul was unaware of it, he never mentioned it, and the two other Gospels never mentioned it either.
So today we're going to be reacting to Dr. Michael Heiser explaining that it can mean virgin. So let's get right into it.
We get websites like this, a religious Santa Claus tale from Beliefnet. It's not a Christian site, it's pretty much a kind of a hodgepodge of spiritual anything. And in this particular article, for the Christmas season, the birth narrative of Jesus shouldn't be taken literally, and it's going to go into all these questions. And the writer of this particular article quotes a lot from a fellow named Bishop John Shelby Spong. He gets quoted practically every season in Time and Newsweek and major news periodicals because they always have to truck out some sort of article about the Christmas season to sort of make fun of it or cast the seeds of doubt about it. And Spong, who is Episcopalian, I believe, is sort of a chief proponent of the idea that the virgin birth account is just nonsense. In this article, we have this paragraph, and here's sort of the crux of the matter. This text, Isaiah and, of course, Matthew, Isaiah 7, Matthew 2, has two problems. First, Matthew did not apparently read Hebrew, which is really a dumb thing to say, but I'm going to try to get through this paragraph without poking fun at other things. I'll just stick to it. First, Matthew apparently did not read Hebrew, so he quoted his text, or this text, from a Greek translation. If he had gone to the Hebrew original, he would have discovered that the word virgin is not in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah used the Hebrew word Almah, which means simply young woman. He did not use the word Betula, which means virgin. Isaiah's text announces that the woman is with child, which hardly qualifies her to be a virgin. Of course, the presuppositions there are very transparent. When Isaiah was translated into Greek, the translators rendered Alma with the Greek word parthenos. Only in that Greek word does the hint of virginity enter the text, and that is the key sentence. So basically they're saying Matthew got this idea from a mistranslation of the Old Testament. There is no virgin birth doctrine. Of course, he's referring to the Septuagint. All you got to do is just go back to the Septuagint. Yeah, it's parthenos, and it would be very easy to say that's what Matthew's quoting. That dismisses the Jewishness of Matthew, which is very, very clear in other regards. But let's just say that he quoted from the Septuagint. Fine. Let's talk about Alma. Other than Isaiah chapter 7, the word Alma in the feminine, Alma is the feminine noun. There is a masculine elam, which refers to a young boy, as Alma refers to a young girl. But let's stick with the feminine. It occurs 6 other times. Now, I want you to see a few things here. This search, rather than you just taking my word for it, here we have the lemma. It's LM there because that is the base form. And we'll see where this occurs. I want you to just take a quick note of where the feminine occurs. We have Genesis 24:43, Exodus 2:8. This is the story of the little girl following the basket, Miriam, so that's the feminine. 1 Samuel 17, there is the masculine reference. 1 Samuel 20, that's David and Jonathan, that's the masculine reference. 1 Chronicles 15 is the term used in a proper name of a place. Same thing with 46:1. Psalm 68:25, Proverbs 30:19, these are Almah. Song of Solomon 1:3, Almah. Song of Solomon 6:8, Almah. There's Isaiah 7:14. And Ezekiel 22:26 is sort of a verbal use of the term. So you don't have very many occurrences of Almah. Now, here's the question. We're going to go back to the verse. Is there any indication in all the occurrences of sexual status? In other words, is there any...
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. Because it could, obviously, if you think about it, it could mean young woman. But also, that also, in my opinion, could be implying that that could be also known as a virgin, not sleeping with anyone. Of course. Well, let's see.
In the context of any of these, that tells you the sexual status of the person in question. And you can write them down. You can look through them as I go through the presentation here. The answer to that question is no, with one exception. The exception is Song of Solomon 6:8. There are 60 queens, 80 concubines, and virgins without number. On the surface, that doesn't look like a sexual reference. The point I'm angling for here is the word itself doesn't point to virginity. It also doesn't telegraph non-virginity. Okay, you need some sort of context for what's going on. Now, in Song of Solomon 6:8, we have the plural, alamot, 60 queens, 80 concubines, and virgins without number. And I'm going to go to Exodus 2 because there's a very similar idea to that breakdown here. And I want you to be able to follow my thought here. This is Esther's trial period. And the same kind of grouping, queens, concubines, virgins, is going to show up in this passage in a significant way. After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had abated, he remembered Vashti, what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's young men who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king." Now, if we go to the reverse interlinear, let's go to Esther 2. Again, I'm doing this because I don't want anybody who's watching the video later to just take my word for it. I'm going to show you the Hebrew underneath.
Wow.
The king's young men who attended him, let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king. Here, for the word virgins, is betula. Now, that is the word, if you remember the quote from Beliefnet, where the writer said, Isaiah didn't use betula, he used Alma. Betula is the word for virgins. Betula is a more precise word for virgin. Now, even in some context for betula, it's not clear what the status is, but there are.
That's what I love about Dr. Michael Heiser. He always brings up receipts, and he brings up, okay, you can make any of these claims all you want, but that doesn't change the fact I know Hebrew, and therefore I can read what Hebrew says, and that's not what you're claiming, you know?
Certain instances of betula, for instance, some of the laws in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, where it's very clear that the betula has not known a man. So there's a point to be made there. And we have na'ara. So we have na'ara and betula, young virgins, beautiful young virgins. In verse 2, we read on, let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins, there we have it again, betula, na'ara, to the harem in Susa, the capital, under custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who's in charge of the women. Let their cosmetics be given to them. Let the young woman, singular, na'ara, who pleases the king, be queen instead of Vashti. Again, you're probably familiar with the Esther story. This pleased the king, and he did so. Now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, so on and so forth. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father or mother. The young woman, the Na'arah, had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. So we'll try Esther out. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, when many young women, Na'arah, were gathered in Susa, the citadel in custody of Haggai, Esther was also taken to the king's palace, put into the custody of Haggai, who had charge of the women. And the young woman pleased him and won his favor. And he quickly provided her with her cosmetics, her portion of food, all the stuff she needed.
Wow.
Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. Now when the turn came for each young woman, Na'arah, to go in to King Ahasuerus, after being 12 months under the regulations for the women, since this was the regular period of their beautifying, 6 months of oil of myrrh and 6 months with spices and ointments from look. These were
Just side note, that is crazy. This is like the modern day or the biblical. This is like Miss Universe or something like that, where all they do is prepare to be as beautiful as possible. Their diet, or how they walk, how they talk. Literally, that's all they do. And Esther was the biblical Miss Universe for that time. That's crazy to think about, but it's true.
women. They didn't need 6 months for this. What was the 12-month trial period for? See if they're pregnant. We'll just keep you here for 12 months. Can't fake your way out of that. When the young woman went into the king in this way, she was given whatever she desired to take with her
Okay, I
from
was kind of wrong about that, but also kind of right.
to the king's palace. In the evening she would go in, and in the morning she would return to the second harem. She doesn't go back to the same group. In custody of Sha'ashgaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. Esther is now no longer a virgin. She is a concubine. She started out as a Betula. Na'ara is all over the place. Okay, that just means young woman. She starts out with the virgins, has her night with the king, the tryout, as it were. Next morning, she goes to a different location under a different guard because now she belongs with the concubines.
That's so messed up if you think about it. Literally, how degrading that is for women. To think like how far we've come to respect all people.
She would not go into the king again unless the king delighted in her and she was summoned by name. Now let's take a look here. We've got virgins, concubines, and we're trying to find a queen. So we have the same idea that when it comes to the harem, remember Song of Solomon 6:8? We're talking about Solomon. Okay, he's talking about the members of the harem, how his beloved is like better than any of them, better than any of the queens, any of the concubines, any of the alamot, third category. Now conceptually, the alamot there would be virgin. Almah would be virgin in that context. That's why Song of Solomon 6:8 sort of gives you a sexual status context. You look at it, what's going on in Esther, you sort of get the cultural flavor for it, but it's not really airtight. We have to be honest there. It looks like Alma there is a virgin. But let's go back here and take a look at some of the other terms here. And particularly, I want to show you Betula. So let's click on that, search for where Betula occurs. There's one hit in this list that's really, really important because you've seen it before. Remember Genesis 24? This is the description of Rebekah. And lo and behold, Rebekah in Genesis 24 is called Betula, Alma, and Na'ar.
Wow.
All three words are used of the same person. Now that is textual proof that Alma does indeed overlap with a very clear term for virgin. And in fact, if you go back to Genesis 24, the narrative is very, very painful in detail that Rebekah, had not known a man. It's very clear. If you're looking for it, you can't miss it. Now, I would suggest that maybe Bishop Spong didn't look very hard.
Yeah.
The point is that when an Israelite, someone familiar with the Hebrew Bible, when they saw the word Alma, they certainly had the category possibility of virgin for that word. Now they know their own language well enough to know that it might not be virgin, but it is absolutely incorrect to say that it cannot be. It is simply textually fraudulent to say that.
Shout out to Dr. Michael Heiser. You could go subscribe to their channel. They still post, even though I know he passed away. They still post a lot, I think weekly. So for sure, go check them out. Yeah. For anyone's out there thinking, Matthew, the writer, literally just wrote virgin. You see, that's totally a mistranslation. They had no idea what they're talking about. No, they would. They would have literally, essentially, probably all of the Old Testament memorized. They would know what they're writing. And they spoke Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic, like all these languages. So you can't just say random stuff and think that it debunks. They always try to find things out of context, little holes to pick and choose, see, and point out that they have a problem with Christianity. But really, at the end of the day, none of it is a good argument. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I encourage you to look to Jesus. Know that he loves you. He's longing to have a relationship with you. Put him first. It will be the best decision you could ever make. In the description below, you will be able to click a link to help you to decide to follow Jesus for the first time. I encourage you to do that today.